Welcome to the Legal Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Jolene, and with the Legal Learning Center, I help prospective law students save $300,000 on law school. To receive 3 money-saving strategies today, visit legallearningcenter.com/money. Today, we will speak with Korey Henson, founder of Runway Strategies, a company that helps law students and lawyers strategically approach their career path so they are happy and fulfilled.
Sure. So I'm Korey Henson, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be here and have this conversation today. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Runway Strategies, which is a coaching and lateral recruiting business that I run, focused solely on the careers of lawyers. And one of the things in the long arc of my career as a lawyer before and doing what I do now is I'm all about helping lawyers find fulfillment and satisfaction in their work. If I say it shorthand, what I say is my job is to help somebody get the right job, not a job. And so the work that I do, and either when I'm working with students, graduates, or anywhere in between, because I do professional development programming for law firms, to help people find the success in their careers so that they can thrive, because they're going to do more of it with those people than with the things they actually want to be doing in their life. So we better like it. So I practiced for a while myself before I made the transition over into law student coaching. I spent some time at a law school, almost a decade, and then have been on one of the most fun journeys I've ever had in my life now, running this business. And here I am today, and I'm thankful to be here.
Well, we are thankful to have you. And you mentioned a lot of different stages of the legal journey. So I'm going to start at the beginning part of that. So you mentioned law students. So what do you do with law students, or do you help pre-law students as well?
I have worked with pre-law students over time. I mean, it's not probably the biggest focus of the work that I do, but it actually is the right time for a lot of the work. I think if I were to say from a coaching standpoint, and I preface, coaching is different from advising. And the way I always describe it is advising, you tell people things and they do things. Whereas coaches, what you really try to do is figure out who you're talking to, what they're good at, what their goals are, what their priorities are, and help them build a plan to achieve their objectives. And that, to me, is the better way to do it, because it really helps that person self-actualize their potential. Whereas in an advising context, a lot of times you're imposing values onto that person. And so I spend a lot of time with the people that I work with, no matter where they are in that journey, really getting to know them and who they are. And there's no better time, in my view, to spend that at the beginning. Because the whole work, in my experience of doing this over the years, is to help the people I work with go from I think to I know. And the more that you can do exploration and answer questions at the early phases of the journey, the better positioned you will be for later on when you need to make some different decisions.
That sounds great. I have seen that myself, where students think that they like a certain area of law, and then they have that first internship, and then they discover they don't like that area of law. And there's very little time to kind of course correct. And again, they don't have maybe that guidance like you're talking about. So they're kind of stumbling. And by the time they graduate, they're taking whatever job crosses their plate and not having that happy career, perhaps. So it sounds like you try to prevent all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I try to describe it as saying, like, I help people build maps for them, right? Because careers aren't the same. There's so many individual priorities, both just in life, right? But then when you get out and do the work, and one of the things that I always talk about in my work is I call it the success conveyor belt, right? And this goes right to that I think to I know aspect. So many people early on think that they want to do something, but they don't actually know what that job looks like at the end. And so they start making a whole bunch of decisions along the way about the thing they think they want to do without having any sense of what it actually looks like. And then all of a sudden you get to a certain point of like, how did I get here? Or this is not what I wanted to do. Whereas if they would have just paused and stepped off that career conveyor belt for just a second, right, to be able to evaluate, where do I actually want to go, right? And then building the plans from there. And yeah, it goes right to that basic fulfillment and satisfaction, right? I do not want those lawyers that get there, 3, 4, 5, 10 years into the profession and are miserable, and all the terrible statistics that anybody can read out there about the profession. I think so much of that stems directly from the fact that people just don't actually do enough work early on to figure out what they actually really want to do.
So how do you do that work?
A lot of just deep exploration. And so, I mean, it's one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was actually from my own career coach. Yes, coaches have coaches. It was actually, the world's all about relationships, right? And so the thing that I focus on is actually building a relationship of trust with the people that I work with. And what we do is just have a lot of conversations about what their priorities are, get to know this person as a person, right? And then, and some of it's, direction about the lay of the land and things you actually want to be considering, right? Because we don't know what we don't know until we know that we don't know it. And so there is a lot of that kind of overarching guidance, right? But I always think about it this way. It's like helping people try to think about a destination, right? And then building an individualized plan to get there. And some of it is honestly, try things, start, right? It is honestly as easy as that, just start, right? And don't think you got to have all of the perfect steps along the way. Do something to start, because really what you're doing is just gathering information to make better next decisions.
That sounds so great. I really wish I had worked with a coach.
Me too. And that's why I actually do it, because I try to envision it. What did I not have when I went to law school that would have made that a more effective journey? That's actually where a lot of my starting point was. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. So,
yeah, it makes sense because first of all, we don't know what areas of law we're going to like until like you said, until we potentially try it. And I think we also start to feel stuck once we are there for a few years, and it's hard to wiggle around and figure out, how do I move sideways, or even if I have to move down in a way, take a step back, right? To then maybe build back up. So is that the kind of stuff that you help them with?
It is. And I mean, I definitely do a lot of work in that, I was going to say it is the way in my head, we have to fix this problem kind of situation, right? Where somebody wants to make a change. They're not exactly in the right thing, but it's always easier to do it on the front side, right? And so I was thinking the more of the work we can do at the beginning, the less likely we probably are to get to a point like that. But we absolutely can fix it if that happens, because, right, it's never going to be perfect. I mean, I've done a lot of different things myself over time, right? And so I'm really big on the, we're just going to aim for as close as we can get, and we'll get there and we can make adjustments. But with the law students, one of the things that I think I've seen a lot over time that trips them up is that this idea that they have to know what they want to do early on when they don't. And then, so what I call it is the early false forced choice. And so they feel like they think they need to know what they want to do. And so they just pick a thing because they have to pick a thing and then make choices around that thing. Then all of a sudden that thing that they chose just because you get family asking you, what do you want to do? Or friends asking you, so what kind of law do you want to practice? All of a sudden that thing becomes real. And so a lot of the work actually is to help resist that temptation so that they can stay open to the world of possibilities a little bit longer. And so, that's a piece of that puzzle there of helping students really be eyes wide open and really honestly understand what this could potentially look like in the long run, because how many future law students actually know what the practice of law actually looks like? They might have an idea from TV or a movie or a family member maybe or something, but is that likely to be what their end result's going to look like? Probably not. And, being able to kind of get people in places to explore, right? I mean, my starting point, honestly, is a more philosophical question with most of them, because it's where it tends to branch off the most. Do you want to plan to prevent problems or fix problems? Because your preventers are almost always going to be your transactional lawyers, and your fixers are almost always going to be your litigators, right? But not all litigators are trial lawyers, right? But it at least gets us in the right side of the philosophical divide to figure out, okay, are we going down more of this path, or are we going down more of this path? And then differentiating what that might look like after that.
That's great. I can totally identify with everything you just said. I took some gap years and I had horrible jobs. And after I graduated from law school, I wanted to do transactional, I want nothing to do with litigation. I want to help people prevent problems, right? Mm-hmm. And I struggled. I graduated in a bad economy. I struggled to find that job. And so after a few years of not really making money, I gave up. My friend was doing litigation work and she said, we're always hiring. And I just kept saying, no. And finally I said, okay, I just need to pay back these loans. Fine, I'll do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want anything to do with trial. Mm-hmm. And I ended up spending about 15 years in that industry, loving it. And I even earned the nickname Trial Queen. So, I mean, I really embraced it. Mm-hmm. So
That one resonates with me so much. I mean, I had that same journey. I was that person that was pretty good at the appellate advocacy. And my professor was like, you really need to try out for the moot court board. And I'm like, no. If I ever see the inside of a courtroom, it means I did something wrong, right? I was that person. And then I finally, in my very last semester of law school, took trial advocacy. And at the time, it was ranked the best school in the country for it at the time. And I had a mentor that was like, you need to take this. And I'm like, and they're like, no, you need, okay, I'll take it. And I did and loved it because I realized it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah, it's well worth experimenting because you just don't know. And I probably should have listened. Yeah, in law school, we were forced to take trial ad. And I actually, on the trial that we were doing, the sample trial, came up with a theory that the professor said only once every few years does someone come up with that theory. And so I obviously had a knack for it, but I still was like, no, I don't want anything to do with this. I just want to sit at a desk, do some paperwork and, clock in, clock out, go home, That didn't happen. And that's okay.
But we found out what we were good at, right? And what we liked. And that's it. It's that fully encapsulates to me that moving from I think to I know.
Yeah, I almost wish law school was a little bit longer just so that people had more time to experiment with all these things.
Mm-hmm. I've been thankful. I mean, the time that I spent in a law school environment as a career coach, one of the things I was very thankful of is the market that we were in is different in the sense that, a lot of law schools are in places where your experience happens in the summer and that's about it. Ours is kind of a year-round environment. And so the students had a lot of opportunities to try different things, whether it's credit-based externships or for pay in law firms in the summer and during the school year. And so it provided a lot of opportunities to kind of flesh out some of those things, right? And so I totally recognize that point for that a lot of law students. And that when I would, be involved in admissions conversations, that's the thing I actually always focus on. Like, hey, think about going to a law school where you can have more experiences than others, right? Because that can somewhat solve that question of I wish it were longer so that you can do more because they're not all created equal.
Yeah, it's amazing. You think that most law schools are similar, but there actually are a lot of differences between them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really good advice because I didn't realize there were schools that had more opportunities for experiences. And yeah, it's those experiences that really make a difference. I think even more so than even being on law review and things like that, because I don't think there's very many jobs out there that relate to law review versus having an extra internship, externship, that kind of thing.
And the number of times I've heard that from employers on the hiring end over the years of they really value that experience that students get in law school. I have one in my inbox right now about a student that I'm working on from a recruiting standpoint, or graduate now, where the feedback from the employer was, well, we really like the resume in general and think that could have a potential, but compared to the other candidates we're looking at, he doesn't have as much experience. And we're talking about somebody who just graduated law school. So, I mean, all of the people being evaluated there all had just graduated law school. So, I mean, they're very, very real pieces of feedback. And that's how I've always kind of done my work. I'm very fortunate to be in charge of employer relations for the law school I was at for a long time, about 7 years. And so almost all of the perspective that I give in my coaching comes from the employers, from the output side. These are what the employers are saying they want. And I get to use that in the recruiting work I do now too, with having those relationships with the employers. What are you actually looking for? And then we coach around that. So
you're like the mole, the secret behind the scenes info.
Yeah. Kind of, yeah. And that's, it's like, yeah. And I mean, I do, unashamedly do the work that I do now. Actually, I shouldn't say unashamedly because I'm really proud of it. My recruiting work is fit-based. I'm not just trying to put somebody into a job. It's trying to figure out, okay, I know you and I know you, and you guys should be together. I know you and I know you. Nah, probably not. I mean, great resume, but not what they're looking for, right? And that's, yeah. So kind of, you're right. That's a good way of thinking about the mole. I like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's so true that you need to have a good fit, both personality-wise, skill-wise, I mean, all the things, but especially as a new attorney, you don't have a lot of skills. So that personality becomes super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we, talk all about that fit all the time, right? And it's usually, I think one of the biggest things that I see people that are new to the career journey struggle with the most is that hiring in law is very different generally from how it is in business. I mean, the way that I've always kind of described it is in business hiring, they get a resume and they have a job posting and they're trying to figure out, okay, these candidates that we're looking at, who has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job? And if they do, then they advance the candidate. And then it kind of becomes again, the next phase of interview, same thing, or a higher level interview. And then, well, maybe the question arises of, do we like this person? And in law, it really generally doesn't operate like that. I mean, in my experience, they skip that first part, right? And the way that the employers, I've had so many employers say it, they're in the room, we already know that person can do the job or be taught. So what we're really trying to figure out is, does this person fit? And basically the way to think about that, in my opinion, is, at the end of the day, you meet a lot of people in life, right? And sometimes people are like very clearly like, oh, I like that person. And other times you're like, right? And sometimes people are just people, right? And in law, hiring ideally is, I really like that person because it's somebody I want to spend a lot of time with, 10 hours a day over 10 or 20 years. Who do I like? I know they all can be taught. Yeah. Who I really like. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for young attorneys who are going on these interviews as to how to determine if it would be a good fit for them?
I'm really, really big on my interview preparation to help people go in that room and just be themselves, and try to have just a real authentic human conversation. When I say be yourself, I mean, I really mean best professional self, right? Because it is an interview after all. But at the end of the day, my fundamental advice on it is, if you go into that room and have a conversation and you're yourself and they don't like you because of that, you actually don't want to work there. And that's good to know at that point, because you something else will come up along the way that'll probably flesh that out. And you all of a sudden, if you know that at the beginning, save yourself a bunch of time, right? And so I'm all about helping people find their people. And so it really is as simple as, and I mean, there's a lot of technique to the interview preparation, but a lot of the interview work is actually really stress management, to help people get less stress, so they'll be more apt to be themselves in that conversation. And so, in terms of, advice beyond, yes, there is, and there's, tactical things that we develop in that coaching, but it really tends to be focused around just helping them be themselves and then evaluate that. Do I like them? Right. And sometimes people overlook those really fundamentally simple questions, but they're the important ones, right? The number of times I've asked that on the backside of an interview, so how'd it go? And they're like, it was okay. And I'm like, but did you like them? And they're like, I'm like, okay, not your job. That's okay. Let's move on. Right. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
The right job. Yeah.
There's always a different vibe. And so I know as a young attorney, sometimes these people don't have a lot of work experience. So it's hard for them to determine how that interview is, that personality is. But, the more jobs you've had or the more interviews you go on,
yep,
you start to see, oh, yeah, they are very stiff, or they look like a party crew. One thing I always look for is, while I'm in the interview or while I'm waiting in the wait room, do I hear people talking at a reasonable volume or a loud volume? Do I hear laughter? Because if people are whispering, that usually indicates to me that they're scared.
Okay. I agree on laughter. I'm a big proponent of laughter and joy in a workplace. So yeah, I mean, there's this tells. I mean, you're right though about your point that you said before about doing more. The more of these things you do, the better of a feel you get for it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I've just noticed whispering places tend to just be like walking on eggshell type of places. I mean, it's not always the case, but it tends to flow. I've worked for a lot of bad places, so I've done it all. When you work with someone, how long do you tend to work with them?
I have some people that, I mean, they've been, people that I've worked with for 8-9 years, because they were people that came to me when I was in the law school environment and have come back. And there's other people that, that were just starting the journey. So, I mean, I kind of view it as holistic, right? And as long as, or whenever somebody wants it, right? Because the idea is, again, if you build a relationship that's founded in trust, right? The key, and I've always approached it this way at the beginning phases, right? If you build that relationship of trust and overlay it with the information to help them build that map, they may not need those things right now, right? But what you've done is laid the foundation for when they do, whether that's a month from now or 4 years from now. They'll be like, oh yeah, you, right? Or like, okay, I know that I can come back and at least have the conversation started there.
Yeah, no, that's super important.
Yeah, I know that's a kind of an ambiguous answer, but right, it's just kind of it. Yeah, and anybody that's going into law school, right, will become to appreciate that it depends. I mean, it depends, right? Because in some respects, if I've done my work right, it maybe doesn't take more than a meeting or two, at the beginning of law school, right? And some people might look at that and say, like, well, okay, but is that really, they might not look at that as success because that person didn't come back. Whereas I might look at it and say, no, it is success because they didn't have to.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Because a lot of my counseling is one time because we get through it. We get to the point, we kind of know what we're discussing and we just get through it. And right. And then they might come back a year later or something like that. Exactly. But just that boost, So yeah, no, that's a great answer though, because I think sometimes also people are afraid of coaches because they're like, okay, how do I break up with this person? Or how long am I going to be stuck with this person? Or I don't know. And so it's good to know that everyone's a little different. It just depends on your needs and situations. So.
Yeah. And so it's a good point because in the law school environment, we always had kind of an interaction that in our team, it was fine. If somebody started with somebody else, they could switch to somebody else. And I'm big on that. I mean, as somebody who has done, the coaching that I do now, but also athletics coaching, I mean, different people need different styles. It's not one size fits all. And I've always been the person that's okay with that, right? If somebody came to me the first time and wanted to go see somebody else, okay, they found a better fit, right? All I care about is that they get to where they want to go and we get there. Yeah.
Now, what about lawyers who have been, like you said, out there for, let's say 5 years and they're not happy. So they want that more fulfilled career. How do you help them transition?
So a lot of that really, again, starts with kind of a deep dive relationship building conversation. And, to your point right there, actually, it's funny. I'm going to ping on that for a second about the being scared of part, because sometimes like some people don't want that relationship, right? They don't want to do it that way. But for me, that's fine. They're not my people, right? And there's somebody else that will help them. Like I want to do it this way. And that's why I'm thankful that I can. But again, it starts with figuring out really what that person's priorities are, right? I mean, I'm big on saying it this way, that the goal, and we're increasingly going to see this, I'm confident, as we emerge from the last year or so and how things have been, about people finding and building work that fits around the life they want to have, as opposed to having to try to build life around the work they have. And those are fundamentally different things. And so, but again, I think why the work that I'm doing now has been pretty well positioned for this moment is those are the conversations I've been having with those kind of people that are 3-5 years out for a long time now, to try to make some changes that help them fit what they're really trying to accomplish. But again, you kind of got to take that deep dive into what's important, right? I mean, but again, everybody's importance different. Some people just want to make more money, right? And that's what's going to, check that fulfillment box for them. Other people want to have more balance in their lives, right? And so I don't think, to me, the right way to do it is kind of a one size fits all. Really got to have that conversation and, right, what are we trying to accomplish? Help them build a plan for that. Sometimes their practice area changes, right? And that's no problem, right? I mean, an easy way to describe this, and I always really want to highlight this point because people they do this to themselves a lot. And then the profession will do it to themselves, as will recruiters sometimes. Say they get started in a certain practice area right after law school because it's just the job that they could get, right? And that happens for a lot of people. And then they get, a year, 2, 3, 5 years into it, and all of a sudden they're seen as, well, that's just somebody who just does insurance defense, right? I hear that one a lot, right? But at the end of the day, right, that's where I'm like, well, okay, yeah, that's the area you practice in. But if you really take a step back and think about it, right, really what you do is civil litigation in the context of defending businesses and insurance-related matters, right? And they're like, oh yeah, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, at the end of the day, if you really zoom out a little bit more, right, okay, so civil litigation, right, generally the same skills, the same rules of procedure, just different application of law. And so you might have to learn some new law to switch practice areas, but within your existing one, you're still going to learn new law, right? That's the easy part. The skills and the rules are the ones that take more time to master, right? And so it just can be that fundamental flip around of how you frame that candidate, both for somebody else that you're positioning them to, or for themselves, understand what they're trying to accomplish. If I articulated that well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's funny because that's what I did, right? Is I did insurance defense, and a lot of people do say, oh, that's just insurance defense. I said, I have helped companies who were going to go under unless I was efficient and helpful and creative. And On the other side, I helped opposing counsel's clients if I felt like, I did workers' comp. If they were honestly injured, I was the one who went back to the insurance adjuster and said, this person's really injured. Make sure they get what they need. So you are able to do so much good out there for companies, for people, even if you're not on the people side. And there's a need for it, and there is so much good there. And I resisted going into that because I thought, oh, it's just business work. I don't know. I just thought it was icky. I really, again, wanted to do transactional where I help people on the front end, not this business stuff, And so, it's a matter of how you look at it, because once I got in there, I realized how I could help the small business owner, or how I could help a big corporation, or how I could help the person on the other side of the table. And I still was able to do what I went to law school to do and what I wanted to do with my life. So it was great, but you have to have that perspective. And sometimes people get a little lost in the shuffle and don't see it that way.
They don't. And it's really easy to have people frame you, as opposed to taking the control and ownership for how you want what you're trying to accomplish be portrayed. And I mean, that sounds, again, simple, but like, I'm really big on stating simple and obvious things, because those are usually if we can boil it down to simple, that's usually the thing that makes the most sense. And the obvious things, if we don't talk about them, are the things that we're most apt to skip right past, right? But so much of what we're going to do is honestly just framing, right? It's building a narrative case. And what do lawyers do all day long? Usually that, right? It's what they forget is, oh yeah, I just need to be able to apply all those skills I use for my clients to myself, right? And then build a narrative for how I want to be seen, right? That's transitions that works, interviews that works. I mean, it's just all narrative crafting.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. So Corey, if people want to work with you or learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
They can find me many ways. So I'm active on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I have a website, which is runway-strategies.com. And the easiest way, though, honestly, just email me, right? Or send me a message through LinkedIn. Those are the best ways to do it. LinkedIn's a good starting point platform for me, because I want people to be there and be present, not just on my page, but on LinkedIn, because it's important to start developing that platform early on. But again, like, that's where you can find my contact info too. So that's why I tend to just direct people there. And then my email address is there. Send me a message. We go from there. Start the conversation.
Perfect.
That's just start. That's the key.
Yeah, no. And it sounds great, because really sometimes, we overcomplicate things. And it sounds like having someone to just slow us down, simplify, and refocus can just do wonders for us. So yes,
I couldn't agree more. Look, if I were to really, try to boil a lot of the work down that I do to simple, is on one part, it's stress management, right? Because I tell people, if I can help you be less stressed, right, you'll allocate your energy and attention better, and you make better decisions, which helps you win. And so much of it is exactly what you said. Just slow down a little bit, and so that you can evaluate and ask the right questions. I mean, that is so fundamentally important on a world that really focuses so many people, or makes people feel like they need to focus on getting to the end, right? And so I'm really big on start, right, with an idea of what the end in mind might look like. And then we just have a conversation and build the right plan for you. And that's the part that a lot of times people miss, right?
Yes. Awesome. Okay. I'll be sure to link it all up in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. I can talk all day about this stuff, so I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
My top takeaways from this chat with Corey. Number 1, coaching is helping people reach their objectives to self-actualize their potential. Doesn't that sound amazing? Number 2, it was subtle, but he mentioned coaches have coaches. Everyone can use some help and some guidance sometimes, and it just helps you move that needle a little further, a little faster if you have that guidance. So don't be afraid of having a coach. Number 3, stay open to the world of possibilities. You don't have to pick an area of law day one. And finally, Corey, as a recruiter, knows what firms are looking for and can help you look your best for those interviews. That's it for this episode. All the tips and links will be in the show notes. A full transcript will be available at legallearningcenter.com/runway strategies. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. That just helps this show help more people. Thanks.